I regained consciousness on a massive wooden raft in the middle of a vast ocean, my head throbbing with intense pain. Scanning my surroundings, I saw nothing but endless water stretching to the horizon, along with 42 girls from my art class and our teacher lying around me. Realizing I was the sole male in the group, a mysterious voice suddenly echoed directly inside our minds before I could process the situation. The voice announced that we had been placed into an ocean survival game governed by strict rules. Each group was assigned a raft led by a captain, and if that captain perished, the entire vessel would sink immediately. It explained that we could unlock unique abilities, salvage resources from the water, upgrade our raft into a proper ship, and defend against nocturnal sea monsters. The rules also stated that a tsunami would strike every week, and we would drift into a completely new sector of the ocean every month. Instead of panicking, the girls actually grew excited, treating the terrifying situation like a grand adventure. Upon reviewing my status interface, I discovered that I had been designated as the captain. This meant everyone's survival rested entirely on my shoulders, bringing an immediate wave of intense pressure. Our teacher, Lin Shisha, stepped up to lead us right away, using her calm and intelligent demeanor to organize the group. Her talent was a top-tier SS-level ability called Strategic Insight, which allowed her to process information and react 3 times faster than a normal person. Following her lead, the other girls began disclosing their own awakened traits to the group. While Ruan obtained an A-level divination talent, her twin sister, Wensa, unlocked an A-level combat proficiency. Another classmate received an S-level Dragon Maiden talent that came with a dragon egg, which was scheduled to hatch in 10 days. Even a girl who had been transported straight from her bathtub possessed a highly practical bubble manipulation power that allowed people to breathe beneath the surface. Eventually, all eyes turned to me, prompting me to check my own character profile and discover my S-level Overlord body talent. This ability granted me a permanent, limitless increase of 1 strength point every single day. Given enough time to scale up, I knew I would eventually become completely invincible. However, that wasn't my only advantage. A secondary, hidden system suddenly went live in my mind called the Multitudinous Offspring System. This system allowed me to grant any single object infinite durability or quantity every time I fathered a new child. For instance, a solitary bottle of fresh water could be transformed into an inexhaustible eternal supply. Combining an endlessly scaling physical form with a source of unlimited materials gave me the ultimate foundational advantage. Taking a deep breath to compose myself, I decided to share the nature of this hidden system with the group, phrasing it as a more children, more prosperity mechanic. To keep the explanation straightforward, I told them that having a child with anyone would allow me to duplicate an item into an infinite supply of food or water. An absolute hush fell over the entire raft the moment the words left my mouth. Then, chaos erupted as the reality of the situation dawned on all the girls. They quickly connected the dots. Since I was the only male and our designated captain, keeping me alive was their absolute priority. If I went down, the vessel would vanish, taking everyone with it, meaning they had to both shield me from danger and help me trigger my resource ability. The realization created an incredibly tense and awkward atmosphere across the deck. Many of the girls began blushing furiously, while others started playfully teasing their friends about stepping up to volunteer. Even Lin Shisha couldn't help but flush, though I could tell her tactical mind was already calculating the immense logistical worth of my power. Realistically, acting on it was out of the question for now, considering we were ordinary students just 30 minutes prior and our platform lacked any walls or privacy. I knew I simply needed to be patient, as people would naturally become more cooperative once our initial resources began to dwindle. My thoughts were interrupted when Ruan pulled me back to the present by asking about my specific command permissions. As it turned out, the word "Captain" was hovering directly above my head in glowing golden text, acting like a massive beacon for any potential hostile. Looking past the visible marker, my functional abilities allowed me to pilot the craft, expand or remodel its structure, and delegate access rights to others. I jokingly remarked that my powers also included the right to toss mutineers into the ocean, which actually caused a few girls to recoil in genuine fright. Lin Shisha quickly intervened to steer the conversation back to our immediate priorities. She reminded us that predatory entities would attack once darkness fell, making the construction of defensive barriers our most critical task. Securing a stable supply of sustenance and potable water was equally critical to our immediate survival. Walking to the edge of the platform, we discovered a cache of over 40 fishing rods provided as our baseline starting gear. I picked one up and cast my line into the water, and the rest of the group quickly lined up along the perimeter to try and secure our first meal. We spent more than an hour angling but caught absolutely nothing for our efforts. Fatigued and discouraged, the girls began to complain loudly as the aquatic life completely ignored our hooks. One classmate finally managed to reel in a wooden crate, but it contained nothing more than a single piece of spoiled bread. The surrounding ocean was turning out to be far more unforgiving with its resources than I had initially anticipated. That scarcity reminded me of Ruan's divination ability, so I asked her to perform a reading to gauge our fortune for the day. She closed her eyes as a traditional bamboo canister manifested in her grip. As she began to agitate the container, she whispered a prayer for good fortune, which the surrounding girls immediately twisted into a joke aimed at me. The teasing left poor Ruan completely mortified and red-faced until her twin, Wensa, stepped in aggressively to silence the crowd. When Ruan finally tipped the canister, a single wooden slip slid onto the deck bearing the words, "Extreme Doom." The reverse side carried an explicit directive stating that failing to erect a secure shelter before twilight would result in a catastrophic event. The light-hearted mood evaporated instantly, replaced by a grim seriousness across the entire group. Lin Shisha reassumed control, ordering everyone to redouble their fishing efforts immediately. We desperately needed to salvage enough lumber to build a protective structure before darkness enveloped us. With the jokes forgotten, everyone worked in absolute, determined silence for the rest of the day. By the time the sun began to set, our collective afternoon of labor had yielded a meager haul: 112 wooden planks, 5 water bottles, and 15 rations of emergency bread. While the food was scarce, the 112 building components were exactly what I needed. I approached the gathered materials and executed the system command to construct a basic cabin measuring 5 meters long, 4 meters wide, and 2 meters high. The wooden planks lifted into the air simultaneously, aligning and locking together seamlessly like an automated construction mechanic from a video game. Within moments, a compact timber structure stood complete with 4 solid walls, a roof, and a secure entryway. The girls stared in awe at the finished structure, though I remained on high alert as the daylight faded rapidly and night took over. I immediately ordered the entire group to move indoors, emphasizing that no one was permitted outside after dark. The interior was incredibly tight, forcing 43 individuals to pack shoulder to shoulder inside a space of roughly 20 square meters. The group actively pushed me into the absolute center of the room, insisting that protecting the captain was paramount for survival. Lin Shisha positioned herself to my left, Ruan stayed close on my right, and the Dragon Maiden stood directly behind me. The confined space became overwhelming as the combined warmth and the scents of various soaps and shampoos filled the air. I retrieved our meager daily rations consisting of 5 bottles of water and 15 portions of emergency bread to distribute. Working alongside Lin Shisha to ration the supplies, we ensured every person received just a single sip of water and a third of a bread ration. The girls showed immense discipline, carefully taking only their exact designated portions without any complaints. A moment of social friction arose when 2 girls simultaneously offered me the remaining 2 water bottles, both watching me with expectant expressions. To defuse the awkwardness, I took both bottles, handed one directly to Lin Shisha, and drank from the other myself. With the initial panic averted, I decided to break the tension by playfully holding the final scrap of bread up to Ruan's lips. She completely froze in place, staring back at me with wide, startled eyes as the surrounding classmates began teasing her relentlessly. Before the teasing escalated, Wensa suddenly snatched the bread from my hand, shoved it into her sister's mouth, and shot me a fierce glare. The protective gesture made everyone burst into laughter, successfully driving away a large portion of the underlying dread. As pure physical exhaustion set in, the students began leaning against one another, gradually drifting off to sleep. Just as I started to lose consciousness myself, a massive impact shuddered through the structural floor from beneath the surface. The sudden jolt caused the entire platform to drop, sending everyone crashing into one another amid panicked screams. Outside, an incredibly violent storm had broken loose, with gale-force winds howling and massive waves battering the exterior walls. Suddenly, a terrified cry echoed through the room as one of the girls pointed toward a structural defect in the wall. Peering through a narrow gap between the planks, we all saw a massive, blood-red eye the size of a basketball featuring a sharp vertical pupil. The entity slowly scanned the room, observing everyone packed inside like a predator evaluating its next meal. A massive, unsettling mouth materialized right beside the eye, pulling back into a wide and deeply disturbing silent grin. An absolute, petrified silence gripped the interior of the cabin for a fraction of a second. Then, a single student broke down in tears, triggering a chain reaction of absolute hysteria, sobbing, and overwhelming panic. Even Lin Shisha lost her composure for a moment, gripping my arm so fiercely that her fingernails dug deeply into my skin. Wensa drew a compact defensive dagger and took up a defensive stance right in front of her sister, visibly trembling but prepared to fight. The entire crowd instinctively surged toward my position, seeking safety in the only male present and the captain who held their lives in his hands. I found myself physically compressed from every possible angle by the crowding students. Despite the absolute chaos surrounding me, an unnatural sense of complete serenity washed over my mind. I attributed this sudden mental clarity to the passive effects of my overlord body talent anchoring my nerves. Looking past the panicked crowd, I kept my eyes locked on the crimson orb that continued to monitor us through the timber partition. While the entity was blocked from entering for the time being, it was obvious this fragile wooden structure would not endure a prolonged assault. The initial prompt had specified that a devastating tsunami would sweep through the sector every 7 days. If we failed to reinforce this basic platform into a legitimate seafaring vessel before that deadline, none of us would survive. Right then, I resolved that the moment morning arrived, we would prioritize maximum resource gathering to build a truly resilient ship. When the first rays of morning light filtered through the wall fissures, a wave of relief washed over me knowing we had survived our first night. I was the first to stand, and as I stretched my limbs, a surge of intense thermal energy radiated throughout my entire anatomy. My overlord body trait had successfully processed its daily increment, granting me a permanent point of raw strength just for making it through the night. I had transformed from an average university student the previous day into someone who felt strong enough to physically stop a charging bull. Pushing the door open, I let a draft of crisp marine air fill the cabin, greeting the exhausted but relieved faces of the surviving group. Lin Shisha recovered her professional composure instantly, reminding the class that the nocturnal entity was absolute proof that we had no time to waste. We immediately convened an early strategy meeting out on the main deck to establish our daily operational goals. I outlined a 3-part objective. First, secure a reliable baseline of food and water. Second, accumulate resources to advance the raft's level. Reaching level 2 would drastically improve wave resistance, while hitting level 5 would fully convert the platform into a true ship. Our third goal was to thoroughly analyze and catalog our individual talents, which significantly brightened the overall mood as demonstrations began. Shu Tao, the individual with the bubble manipulation trait, stepped forward first to showcase her ability. She puffed up her cheeks and expelled a vibrant pink sphere that rapidly expanded until it was larger than an average adult. One adventurous classmate touched the exterior surface and was instantly drawn inside, drifting upward into the air above the deck. The initial thrill quickly turned to panic as she drifted higher, prompting Shu Tao to pop the sphere and send her classmate landing flat on her back. The display brought collective laughter, but the tactical value of the ability for defense and deep-sea exploration was immediately obvious. Next up was Ning Yao, the holder of the S-tier Dragon Maiden designation. Cradling her radiating dragon egg, she explained that incubation required consistent human body heat to progress. She immediately assumed a cross-legged position on the deck, pulling the egg into her lap and shielding it exactly like a brooding bird. When another student playfully poked fun at the sight, Ningyao fired back that the hatchling would target her critic first, drawing smiles from the crowd. Even Lin Shixia offered a rare smile, and I noticed her looking in my direction with an expression that had noticeably softened. Once the demonstrations concluded, I redirected everyone's focus back toward our primary survival tasks. Xu Tao and Ning Yao remained behind to refine their respective abilities, while the rest of the group grabbed fishing gear and moved to the perimeter. Our mandate for the afternoon was completely straightforward. Secure enough resources to guarantee our safety and catch an actual meal. The midday sun proved entirely merciless, turning the wooden deck into a virtual kiln that left everyone drenched in perspiration. Seeking an advantage, I requested that Ruan perform another divination to check our mechanical luck parameters for the afternoon. She agitated the bamboo cylinder once more until a solitary wooden marker slipped loose, indicating a status of minor luck. While it wasn't an extraordinary reading, it was a massive upgrade from the previous day's omen, and the fortune seemed to manifest immediately. Shortly after the reading, my fishing rod experienced a violent downward pull that tested my physical limits. Utilizing my newly enhanced physical strength, I hauled the line upward and pulled a seaweed-encrusted black iron chest onto the deck. The surrounding crowd erupted into cheers as we forced the container open to inspect the salvage. Inside, we recovered 50 additional wooden planks, 2 rations of stale bread, and the true prize, a schematic for a fundamental engineering workbench. Lin Shisha's eyes sparkled at the sight of the document, recognizing that a workbench opened up advanced manufacturing capabilities. I instantly processed the schematic, deposited the required timber and fasteners into the interface, and watched a complete workbench materialize on deck. The newly unlocked crafting directory presented a massive array of critical upgrading options. The engineering interface presented options to assemble a metal hearth for cooking and deterring lesser entities, an iron cauldron for preparing heated meals, and a water purification apparatus to convert brine into potable water. However, the harsh reality of our situation quickly set in, as our inventory completely lacked the necessary metal components, polymers, and charcoal required to manufacture them. Recognizing that the technical blueprint was non-functional without raw materials, I immediately encouraged the class to remain resilient. I argued that if the ocean could yield a complex manufacturing blueprint, it would undoubtedly yield the base elements required to build it if we kept trying. Driven by that logic, the entire group maintained a relentless fishing effort throughout the remainder of the afternoon. By twilight, our collective labor had successfully accumulated over 300 structural wooden planks, which marked a significant logistical success. Unfortunately, our nutritional gains told a vastly different story, as 43 individuals had managed to salvage only 3 small fish and 5 standard rations of compressed biscuits. Such a minuscule amount of nourishment was nowhere near sufficient to sustain a group of our size. As the darkness reclaimed the sky, audible stomach growls echoed across the deck, signaling a deep, widespread hunger. This physical deprivation was rapidly becoming far more difficult for the students to manage than their psychological fear of the nocturnal monsters. The toll was written plainly across every face in the group. They were utterly exhausted, starving, and visibly reaching the limits of their endurance. When night fully descended, the interior of the cabin proved far more accommodating due to the structural expansions made with the afternoon's lumber bounty. At the very least, we were no longer physically compressed against one another like cargo. Taking advantage of the extra space, I had partitioned a modest, private section in the corner to serve as the captain's quarters, utilizing a simple fabric sheet as a makeshift barrier. I meticulously divided our minimal food reserves into 43 equal microportions, ensuring everyone received a single drop of water and a fragment of biscuit no larger than a finger. The meager allocation failed to satisfy anyone, and the minor intake of food only seemed to amplify the collective sensation of starvation. In the quiet of the room, a low whisper broke the silence, suggesting how incredible it would be if we possessed an inexhaustible source of fresh water. Instantly, every single gaze in the cabin shifted directly toward my position in the center. The previous playful banter and teasing vanished entirely, replaced by an expression of raw, desperate necessity. A singular realization connected the entire room. My latent secondary ability could permanently resolve our supply crisis, but triggering it required fathering an offspring. Feeling the immense psychological weight of 42 desperate stares, I stood up, instructed the class to try and rest, and retreated behind my fabric curtain to lie down. I resolved that the girls needed to arrive at this monumental decision entirely on their own terms, as I had no intention of forcing the issue. Outside the timber walls, the predatory creatures resumed their aggressive scratching against the exterior framework. The horrific scraping noises cutting through the heavy internal silence made the atmosphere feel exponentially more oppressive. I remained awake in the darkness with my hands supporting my head, listening intently to the subtle sounds of the cabin. I could easily overhear the twins conversing nearby, with Wensa expressing severe thirst while Ruan quietly lamented her intense hunger. Every individual in the structure was experiencing profound discomfort, yet I chose to wait, guided by a critical understanding of our social dynamics. Securing an infinite supply of resources was not merely a mechanism for survival. It was the ultimate tool for establishing absolute authority. Controlling the fundamental means of survival would ensure these individuals truly respected and followed my directives, rather than merely tolerating my default status as captain. Suddenly, the fabric partition shifted as a hand gently grasped the edge of the material. A familiar, distinct scent filled my immediate space, signaling the arrival of Lin Shixia, our teacher. The woman who consistently maintained an aura of complete professional composure now stood before me with a deeply flushed complexion, nervously biting her lip. She quietly murmured that she wished to discuss our resource management strategy, though the underlying subtext of her presence was entirely transparent to both of us. Reaching out, I lightly encircled her wrist with my fingers and gently guided her forward into my private quarters. I whispered that if she wished to engage in a truly serious tactical discussion, stepping inside would be the proper way to demonstrate her sincerity. However, the intimate momentum I was building with Lin Shixia was abruptly shattered. Right as the interaction was progressing, a massive impact violently jarred the entire aquatic platform. The force of the blow sent her crashing directly against the wooden partition, instantly snapping her back to her analytical senses. Breathing heavily, she stammered that she wasn't mentally prepared for this step and quickly fled the quarters. I lay flat on my back staring into the darkness, completely infuriated by the terrible timing of the disruption. I silently vowed that the aquatic entities responsible for interrupting us would eventually pay a heavy price for their interference. The following morning arrived with a grim atmosphere, as the persistent noises from the monsters had prevented anyone from obtaining proper rest. Lin Shixia actively avoided any direct eye contact with me as I stepped out onto the deck, her cheeks instantly warming with a pink hue. Seeking a shift in momentum, I directed Ruan to perform her daily divination ritual once more. Still heavy with sleep, she agitated the bamboo cylinder until a wooden slip dropped out, causing her eyes to widen in complete disbelief. The marker indicated an omen of great fortune, accompanied by an absurdly positive description on the reverse side. It claimed we would uncover valuable salvage with every single cast, cross paths with someone extraordinary upon making a right turn, and joked about the total absence of maritime traffic hazards. Despite the eccentric phrasing, the underlying luck proved absolutely authentic. The entire morning progression yielded unparalleled results, as every single cast brought up fish or salvage crates in rapid succession. The ocean seemed intent on showering us with wealth, delivering scrap metal, polymers, charcoal, pristine bottled water, bread rations, and substantial fish. By midday, our accumulated inventory surpassed the combined total of the previous 2 days of grueling labor. Our storage held 500 wooden planks, 25 metallic components, 32 pieces of plastic, 10 units of charcoal, 24 water bottles, 30 loaves of bread, and 17 large fish. For the first time since our arrival, the group enjoyed a substantial meal, with each person receiving half a bottle of water and a generous portion of bread. Seizing the opportunity, I approached the engineering workbench and successfully manufactured both the iron fire pit and the cooking cauldron. The sight of functional cooking equipment drove the girls into a state of absolute excitement. Several students began processing the raw fish with unrefined but completely focused movements, eventually boiling the meat in clean seawater. Even without a single grain of seasoning, the aroma of hot fish broth drifting across the deck after 3 days of dry rations felt like the ultimate luxury. The entire class clustered tightly around the steaming cauldron like a flock of ravenous hatchlings waiting to be fed. I chose to sit apart from the commotion in a quiet corner of the deck to evaluate my personal character status interface. The readout still indicated 0 spouses, 0 offspring, and 0 completed resource conversions. On a positive note, my physical conditioning score had risen to 13 points due to the passive daily scaling of my Overlord body talent. However, a glaring irony in our current situation became immediately apparent to me. With our current luck parameters operating at peak efficiency and food flowing in abundantly, no one felt the acute desperation required to help me unlock my core system power. The more prosperous our immediate circumstances became, the less urgency anyone felt to activate my more children, more blessings mechanic. I let out a quiet sigh, realizing what a bizarre and counterintuitive dilemma I was facing. Once the hot fish broth was consumed, a wave of vitality and renewed energy swept through the entire group. Our extraordinary streak of luck persisted throughout the afternoon hours, with valuable materials surfacing as if the sea itself were presenting us with gifts. While the class remained focused on harvesting the water, I opened the specialized captain's interface and uncovered a critical piece of geographical data. The console revealed that our vessel was currently navigating an environment designated as the Shadow Wind Sea. This specific classification immediately explained our initial hardships, as the zone featured exceptionally suppressed material drop rates alongside a doubled monster spawn frequency at night. We had essentially been dropped directly into a high-difficulty environment from the very inception of the survival game. Furthermore, the telemetry indicated we would remain confined to this brutal sector for another 27 days before the current would carry our raft into a new zone. The moment I communicated this tactical reality to the assembled group, the cheerful energy on deck instantly plummeted once again. Having to endure a full month of amplified monster activity was a daunting prospect, but I moved quickly to redirect the group's focus toward immediate, actionable goals. I accessed the interface and brought up the specific structural requirements needed to advance our raft to level 2. 800 wooden planks, 50 iron blocks, and 50 units of plastic. Considering the exceptional luck parameters we were experiencing that day, we had a legitimate opportunity to complete the upgrade before darkness fell. Motivated by the clear objective, the students returned to the perimeter lines and resumed fishing with a massive surge of renewed energy. Shortly after, Lin Shisha caught my attention and quietly pulled me back into the privacy of the captain's quarters. With her face flushed as red as a tomato, she offered a sincere apology for her panicked retreat the previous night. She admitted that she had never found herself in that type of intimate situation before and asked if we could take things slow to establish genuine mutual trust first. To emphasize her point, she requested that I drop her professional title and simply address her as Shisha or Sister Xia from now on. Hearing her vulnerability caused all my lingering frustration from the prior night to vanish completely, as I respected her honesty and boundaries. I assured her that I fully understood and would not force any expectations on her, though I couldn't resist testing her boundaries just a little bit further. I casually asked if she would let me examine her leg, which made her freeze and blush even deeper, though she gave a quiet nod of approval. I had her sit down on the basic wooden framework of the bed and began applying a firm massage to her lower leg muscles. Her body tensed up initially as she questioned my motives, but I reassured her that I was simply trying to alleviate the tension from a full day of standing on the deck. As I continued massaging Shisha's leg, Ningyao abruptly threw back the fabric curtain to deliver a major update regarding our resource accumulation. Catching sight of the intimate scene, she froze instantly, stammered a frantic disclaimer about not seeing anything, and bolted back out to the deck. Shisha turned a brilliant shade of crimson, violently pulled her leg away from my grip, and rushed out of the quarters in total embarrassment. I immediately followed Ningyao outside and playfully pinched her cheek as a light-hearted penalty, threatening to boil her dragon egg if she interrupted me again. Personal distractions aside, the logistical update she brought was completely accurate and highly encouraging. The group had successfully stockpiled 821 wooden planks, 55 iron blocks, and 63 pieces of plastic, exceeding our target. I immediately executed the upgrade command, watching the system consume the resources to elevate our aquatic platform to level 2. The structural deck instantly became visibly thicker and smoother, expanding our overall surface area by a full 25%. A protective half-meter wooden barrier materialized around the entire perimeter, and best of all, the system unlocked our communication channels. We now had access to 2 distinct text feeds: a localized channel for our specific sea sector and a comprehensive global broadcast channel. The local chat was filled with absolute desperation, confirming that every survivor trapped in the Shadow Wind Sea was experiencing the same brutal conditions we had faced. It became obvious that our massive haul was entirely a product of Ruan's extraordinary divination ability tipping the scales in our favor. The global channel offered far more tactical insight, revealing that advanced groups had already pushed their vessels to level 3 or 4. The text logs confirmed that different oceanic sectors yielded unique regional resources, which meant reaching level 3 would unlock a global trading marketplace. For my specific hidden system, an open market meant my ability to generate infinite resources could instantly make our group unimaginably wealthy. Suddenly, a massive piece of server-wide information flashed across the global interface regarding the progression to a level 5 vessel. To convert a basic platform into a legitimate seafaring ship, survivors required a rare item known as a storm core, obtainable only by surviving the initial tsunami in 4 days. Furthermore, the first captain globally to achieve ship status would be rewarded with 3 epic-tier treasure chests containing purple-quality equipment. As the notification faded, Lin Xixia and the rest of the group turned their gazes directly toward me, the strategic implications clear to everyone. We all recognized that to race ahead of the global population, we desperately needed to activate my system to secure unlimited resources for rapid upgrading. When night fell, Lin Xixia stepped into my private quarters alone, having clearly arrived at a definitive, calculated resolution. She stated with absolute clarity that she was prepared to commit herself to me for the collective future and survival of the entire group. Dropping to her knees, she locked her eyes onto mine and quietly requested that I be gentle with her. I could see that her choice was completely devoid of impulsive emotion. It was a profound, calculated sacrifice, which made me respect her character even more. However, just as the moment was about to culminate, a violent explosion of brilliant light erupted from the far side of the exterior deck. Ningyao's dragon egg was undergoing a premature hatching sequence, sending arches of golden lightning and crimson flames cascading across the platform. The display was so intense that the nocturnal entities circling our perimeter shrieked in terror and fled back into the deep water. Lin Xixia and I immediately abandoned our position and rushed outside to find a highly critical situation unfolding. The premature hatching was actively siphoning Ningyao's core vitality directly into the shell, leaving her face pale and contorted in agony. Several students panicked and moved to physically sever her connection to the object, but I loudly commanded them to stand down. I recognized that this was a deep biological instinct. The egg had detected the approaching tsunami and was forcing its birth early to ensure survival. Severing the connection prematurely would likely shatter her S-tier talent permanently, so I ordered the group to administer food and water while maintaining a guard. I took up a position directly in front of her, firmly gripped her hands, and activated my overlord body to channel my own raw energy into her system. The interface recognized the action as an energy transfer, actively converting my accumulated physical strength points into pure life essence for her. The process took an immense physical toll on my body, but I watched her agonizing expression gradually soften as my energy stabilized her. The entire class remained awake throughout the night, surrounding Ningyao as pillars of golden light shot upward into the dark sky, and the shell fractured piece by piece. As dawn finally broke, the radiant shell completely shattered without a destructive blast, releasing a soft, ambient crimson and violet glow. Floating gently above the fragments was a miniature creature no larger than a human palm, covered in brilliant red-gold scales. It possessed large, expressive golden eyes, tiny forming horns, and a tail tipped with a living golden flame. The creature let out a soft, affectionate sound and immediately began rubbing its head against Ning Yao's cheek. Despite her total physical exhaustion, she let out a relieved smile at the sight of her newly born companion. The hatchling then turned its attention to me, and I undoubtedly looked completely skeletal, pale as paper with deep dark circles from the all-night energy drain. The little dragon launched itself directly into my arms like a small fireball, nuzzling into my chest and licking my chin as if it viewed me as its father and feared for my life. The emotional display triggered a wave of overwhelming sentiment across the deck, causing Ning Yao to burst into tears and apologize for causing my condition. Within seconds, half the girls on deck were weeping openly, crowding around my position and squeezing me so tightly that I could barely draw breath. The crowding became so severe that Lin Xixia had to loudly command everyone to step back before they physically suffocated me on the deck. Pulling up my personal interface, I discovered that my permanent constitution score had cratered from 13 all the way down to 9 points. The emergency energy transfer had cost me an immense amount of my foundational physical progress. However, looking past the attribute penalty, a massive smile crept across my face as I noticed a brand new notification on the readout. I had successfully unlocked a secondary S-tier talent designated as Dragon Warrior. Because I had infused my own Overlord body essence into the egg during its critical hatching phase, the hatchling had established a permanent soul contract with me. This talent allowed me to physically merge with the creature to assume a specialized combat form, granting massive boosts to strength, speed, and elemental resistances. Furthermore, the trait granted me an innate passive charm that made all draconic lifeforms naturally benevolent toward me, with the system explicitly labeling me a dragon father. Additionally, my primary Overlord body profile now carried a critical modifier regarding my physical development. It specified that I could drastically accelerate my strength accumulation by consuming high-quality, energy-dense nourishment. Standard rations like dry bread and plain water would no longer suffice, but specialized, high-tier food would completely supercharge my developmental curve. Ning Yao quickly pushed past the surrounding crowd to personally administer water and bread to me, her eyes still red as she promised to make amends for the toll I took. She gently placed the juvenile dragon back into my arms, and the small creature licked my cheek with absolute care. I reassured her that I was completely fine and nowhere near as fragile as I looked, which made her smile through her tears, even if she didn't entirely believe me. Following a brief period of uninterrupted rest on the deck, I could feel the initial waves of vitality slowly returning to my body. The passive recovery rate of my Overlord body proved significantly superior to that of an ordinary human, allowing my physical reserves to stabilize rapidly despite my depleted constitution. When Wan conducted her next divination ritual, the results indicated another streak of positive fortune, solidifying her status as the group's definitive good luck charm. With only 3 days remaining until the predicted tsunami, I convened a briefing to outline our next objective: advancing the vessel to level 4 before the storm arrived. The projected material costs were staggering, with level 3 alone requiring 1,500 wooden planks, 100 iron blocks, and 100 units of plastic. While the sheer volume of materials initially unnerved the class, I reassured them that our consistent luck parameters made any logistical target entirely achievable. To improve efficiency, I instructed the crafting group to manufacture basic wooden stools, allowing everyone to sit comfortably during long hours of fishing rather than standing indefinitely. This minor adjustment significantly boosted collective morale, proving that small comfort measures can often be far more motivating than elaborate speeches. By midday, another batch of hot fish broth was prepared, creating a relaxed and cheerful atmosphere across the deck. Several classmates began playfully joking about how exhausted I appeared after the previous night's events, which caused Juan to turn a deep shade of crimson, while I intentionally ignored the remarks. Shortly after, Lin Xixia approached me quietly away from the crowd and firmly grasped my hand. Her fingers cool, but her grip filled with absolute resolve. She stated that we could no longer afford to delay our primary strategy, as her tactical assessment aligned perfectly with my own plan. The objective was to unlock the global trading market at level 3, utilize my hidden resource ability to secure raw materials, and rapidly advance to level 4 or 5 before the deadline. Executing this rapid progression was our singular path to securing the 3 epic tier reward chests promised to the world's first advanced ship. I commended her brilliant tactical insight, which earned me a classic blush and an affectionate eye roll from her. Nearby, a group of students was whispering quietly, and my attention drifted to Ruan, who sat silently with her fishing rod looking unusually downcast. Her twin, Wensa, was actively nudging her arm, aggressively advising her to take the initiative before the opportunity slipped away entirely. I was stunned to learn through the grapevine that Ruan had actually harbored quiet feelings for me for the past 3 years, a detail I had never noticed back on campus. By twilight, our concentrated efforts yielded the necessary materials, allowing me to execute the level 3 upgrade command and immediately open the global marketplace interface. A glowing holographic blue monitor manifested on the deck, displaying an immense variety of listings ranging from weapons and skill manuals to food items and ornamental coral jewelry. Survivors from diverse oceanic sectors were actively trading commodities, though our group lacked the specialized assets required to purchase anything initially. One of the girls pointed out the obvious. The moment my infinite conversion power went live, the entire global marketplace would essentially become our personal treasury. Instantly, every gaze on the deck shifted between Lin Shixia, myself, and the fabric curtain sealing the entrance to the captain's quarters. There was an unspoken, unanimous understanding among the entire crew that tonight was the critical deadline to activate our advantage. When darkness fell, an absolute quiet settled over the platform as the students retreated to their designated sleeping areas, though the tension kept everyone wide awake. I took Lin Shixia by the hand and guided her past the partition into the captain's cabin, letting the fabric curtain fall shut behind us to seal out the rest of the world. Following a long and physically exhausting night, dawn arrived, and I immediately opened my system interface only to find a negative pregnancy status readout. Refusing to accept a setback after so much effort, I firmly caught Lin Shixia by the wrist as she prepared to step outside and pulled her back onto the bedding. Though the students outside were audibly shocked by the immediate daytime continuation, I remained entirely focused on securing our survival advantage. By sunset, Lin Shixia finally emerged from the quarters with visibly unsteady steps, while I collapsed backward onto the bed from pure exhaustion. Moments later, a brilliant golden system notification flashed across my vision, confirming that Lin Shixia had successfully conceived. To my absolute amazement, the readout specified she was carrying twins, meaning I had unlocked 2 separate opportunities to grant any item infinite quantity. The overwhelming relief was so profound I nearly broke down in tears of joy before making my way out to the main deck to announce the success. I retrieved a single standard bottle of pristine drinking water and immediately targeted it with my newly unlocked conversion slot. Instantly, my digital inventory ledger updated to display an endless, capped parameter. Pure bottled water X99999, infinite. The entire platform erupted into absolute hysteria, with girls jumping in celebration, weeping with relief, and embracing one another in pure joy. I manifested a massive mound of plastic water bottles directly onto the wooden deck, instructing the entire class to consume as much as they desired. They rushed the pile immediately, consuming the crisp fluid rapidly, as if they had been wandering a desert for weeks. Turning my attention to the open global market, I listed an introductory batch of 100 water bottles and received 400 iron blocks in less than 3 seconds. Clean water was clearly treated like absolute gold across the various survival sectors, giving us an unmatched economic leverage. Even with a strict system limitation of 10 marketplace transactions per day, a daily volume of 1,000 bottles was more than enough to secure any building materials we required. I systematically utilized my remaining transaction slots to purchase massive quantities of structural planks, iron blocks, polymers, and premium food rations. During the process, a unique listing caught my attention. A rare, blue-quality golden dragonfish noted for containing dense concentrations of pure life energy. I immediately acquired the asset, had the culinary group boil it into a rich broth, and consumed the meal to trigger my overlord body's specialized dietary modifier. The high-energy intake supercharged my system, granting a permanent 10-point boost to my primary physique score, which instantly jumped from 9 up to 20 points. I could feel the raw physical power equivalent to 2 fully grown men coursing through my muscles, while the juvenile dragon tried to steal a bite before Ning Yao pulled it away. Backed by Ruan's ongoing luck blessing, the afternoon harvesting session proved incredibly lucrative, yielding over 50 units of rare fine lumber from the water. By the time night approached, my inventory was completely saturated with the necessary components required for our next major upgrade. I initiated the command, consuming 3,000 planks, 250 iron blocks, 250 plastics, and 50 units of fine lumber to push the vessel to level 4. The platform instantly expanded to the dimensions of a regulation basketball court, complete with reinforced defensive walls and an elevated lookout tower on a secondary level. Reaching the final level 5 ship transformation required an immense volume of advanced resources, alongside the elusive storm core only obtainable during the upcoming tsunami in 2 days. Scanning the newly unlocked manufacturing directory, I discovered a practical schematic for assembling standard mechanical crossbows and matching steel-tipped bolts. Turning to the assembled group, I loudly announced our operational objective for the following day, ensuring every single person was equipped with a functional ranged weapon. The next morning, I woke up to the sensation of the miniature dragon affectionately licking my face, and stepped outside to find the crew already waiting with high energy. The unlimited supply of clean hydration had worked absolute miracles on their physical states, leaving everyone looking fully revitalized with visibly healthier complexions. I spotted Lin Shixia leaning against the perimeter barrier, quietly observing the morning horizon as the early light reflected off the water. She offered a warm smile as I approached her position, and she allowed me to hold her hand without making any attempt to withdraw from the gesture. I accessed the market console and executed all 10 of our daily trade slots, converting 1,000 water bottles into enough materials to manufacture 25 crossbows and over 1,000 bolts. The main deck was instantly transformed into a coordinated munitions workshop, with students organizing components while others followed the workbench schematics. Crossbow units began rolling off the production line in rapid succession, prompting Zolling to step forward and conduct the initial live-fire test. She lined up a target 10 meters away and unleashed a bolt that buried itself entirely into a piece of dense floating timber, demonstrating impressive kinetic force. The successful demonstration brought loud cheers from the girls, as possessing legitimate weapons to defend themselves completely altered their psychological outlook. I distributed the 25 completed crossbows to our designated security detail to begin accuracy practice, while the remaining students focused on fishing for additional materials. Shortly after, I committed a significant oversight while discussing postpartum nutritional strategies with Lin Shixia near the main deck area without lowering my voice. I casually referred to the upcoming twins as our collective beacon of hope, which immediately drew the curious attention of several nearby classmates. Realizing the secret was out, I chose to embrace the moment, pulling Lin Shixia firmly into my arms and addressing the entire gathered crew. I loudly announced to the deck that Sister Xia was officially pregnant with twins, causing an absolute, stunned silence to grip the platform for a fraction of a second. Then, the entire raft erupted into a state of absolute, unbridled chaos as the girls completely lost their minds at the news. The students swarmed Lin Shixia immediately, treating her as if she were the most precious asset on the vessel, which, given our strategic situation, she officially was. They carefully guided her to a seating area, eagerly offering to handle her fishing duties and bringing her fresh bottles of water. Shixia repeatedly insisted that she was entirely capable of working, but the overprotective crew completely ignored her protests. Ning Yao stood slightly apart from the commotion, cradling her miniature dragon with a visibly downcast expression. As she glanced between me and the royal treatment being showered upon Lin Shixia, it was obvious she was experiencing a deep sense of exclusion. Sensing her mood, the juvenile dragon looked up into her face with an expression of pure confusion. Ruan was similarly quiet, standing near a corner of the deck with her gaze directed downward toward the timber floorboards. Her twin sister, Wensa, aggressively elbowed her side once more, muttering that if she didn't take the initiative immediately, the window of opportunity would close forever. Ruan simply blushed furiously and whispered for her sister to stop speaking absolute nonsense. Observing the entire social dynamic play out on deck filled me with a strong sense of satisfaction, knowing Shisha's status among the group was now completely unassailable. However, my analytical thoughts were already shifting toward our next critical challenge: securing high-grade prenatal nutrition. I was absolutely determined that my developing offspring would not suffer any developmental disadvantages at the starting line. With only a single day remaining before the projected arrival of the tsunami, I utilized all 10 of our daily market transactions to purchase the remaining manufacturing resources. The influx of materials allowed us to produce the final batch of ranged weapons, ensuring all 42 girls were officially armed. Seeing the entire crew grip their mechanical crossbows with genuine confidence provided an immense boost to our collective security profile. Right on cue, our established luck parameters manifested again when Shutao managed to reel in a blue-grade ability manual. The text outlined a specialized skill called Power Charge Strike, which allowed a user to triple the kinetic damage of a melee assault after a full 60 seconds of concentration. The group unanimously agreed that the manual should be allocated to me, considering the limitless physical endurance granted by my overlord body talent. I processed the manual instantly, integrating the combat modifier into my status panel just before another student salvaged a complete set of green-tier iron armor. The heavy gear included a reinforced helm, a solid breastplate, leg guards, and matching combat boots. I immediately transferred the defensive equipment to Xiaoling, whose inherent strongman talent made her the ideal vanguard tank for our operations. The allocation made her so incredibly ecstatic that she caught me in a massive, powerful bear hug right in front of the entire laughing crew. As twilight faded, I accessed the global communication feed to analyze the international survival landscape. With the tsunami hours away, the server was filled with intense chatter, including a user named Long Owen bragging about his level 4 platform. Survivors navigating standard oceanic sectors were confidently showcasing their engineered defensive frameworks. In stark contrast, the text logs from our specific Shadow Wine Sea painted a picture of absolute devastation, with individuals barely holding onto shattered rafts without hot sustenance. Reading the bleak updates, the girls laughed softly and expressed immense gratitude for my leadership and the stability of our vessel. A few of the more daring students even slipped past my guard to plant brief, playful kisses on my cheek as a sign of appreciation. I turned a helpless gaze toward Lin Xixia, who merely smirked and shrugged her shoulders as if to say I had brought this attention upon myself. Suddenly, a red system alert flashed across our screens, announcing that the initial global tsunami would strike precisely at 9 o'clock the following morning. The bulletin reiterated that the first group globally to convert their platform into a true ship would claim 3 epic-tier reward chests. This marked our final night of preparation, and following our evening meal, the crew requested permission to utilize our infinite resource supply for hot baths. Given that no one had been able to wash for nearly a week, I readily agreed to the logistical request. I manifested hundreds of pristine water bottles next to the private hygiene enclosure we had constructed out of structural timber. The students filtered into the space in organized groups of 10, and the resulting sounds of splashing water, laughter, and playful teasing drifting across the deck proved an immense test of my focus. I sat outside on a storage crate attempting to maintain complete composure, though the psychological strain actually triggered a sudden nosebleed. Enduring 3 consecutive hours of that auditory environment felt like absolute psychological torture. Once the final rotation emerged looking completely refreshed and smelling clean, I purposefully marched over to Lin Xixa's position. Right in front of the entirely startled and wide-eyed crew, I firmly caught her by the hand and guided her back toward the captain's quarters. She offered a mild professional protest, reminding me that a critical survival conflict was scheduled for the morning. I shot back that a pending battle was the exact reason we required an intense training session tonight, quickly drawing the fabric curtain closed behind us. From the main deck, I could hear the girls playfully cursing my audacity and expressing faux sympathy for Sister Xia, but my actions were entirely calculated. The upcoming day carried existential stakes, and I refused to face a catastrophic tsunami without maximizing our operational advantages in every possible metric. Following an extended night with Lin Xixia, I felt physically revitalized, until an intense tremor violently shook the foundational timber at exactly midnight. Hostile aquatic entities began breaching our perimeter barriers, swarming onto the main deck from every single direction simultaneously. Right then, the annoying, cheerful voice of the system entity echoed in my mind, casually informing us that the tsunami in the Shadow Wind Sea triggered at midnight rather than 9 in the morning. I silently cursed the entity for the severe lack of advanced warning as the combat constraints materialized on our interfaces. The parameters were straightforward. Endure the assault for a full 60 minutes, with the modifier that slaying hostiles would actively reduce the survival countdown timer. Conversely, failing to eliminate the creatures would cause the surrounding wave velocity to scale up until the vessel was completely obliterated. Lin Xixia assumed her tactical command role instantly, shouting out optimized defensive positioning to the entire crew. Zhaoling, encased in her heavy iron armor, anchored the front line like a literal human tank to absorb the initial impacts. Wensa utilized her high agility to dart through the shadows with her dagger, executing lethal flank strikes against the invading entities. Simultaneously, Xu Tao deployed massive, reinforced pink spheres to encapsulate and neutralize airborne hostiles before they could breach our lines. Ningyao initiated her fusion sequence, illuminating the deck in a brilliant aura of golden and crimson energy, as she and her dragon incinerated waves of enemies with elemental lightning and fire. Due to my own established soul bond with the hatchling, a unique evolution triggered within her S-rank talent parameters. The modified ability now permitted either Ningyao or myself to deploy the dragon as an independent combat asset rather than restricting it to a singular solo fusion. The remaining crew members lined up along the secondary level, maintaining a continuous, rapid-fire volley of crossbow bolts into the advancing horde. Xixia constantly utilized her strategic insight talent to identify and broadcast the precise anatomical vulnerabilities of the larger hostiles. When a colossal, building-sized starfish entity breached the deck, Xixia immediately located its primary weakness, a concealed central eye located on its ventral underbelly. I immediately initiated my newly acquired power charge strike, concentrating my physical energy for a full 60 seconds before launching myself directly at the Titan. I unleashed a massive, 10-meter arc of kinetic energy that sliced the Leviathan completely in half, instantly shaving 3 full minutes off our survival countdown. The final 5 minutes of the conflict proved exceptionally brutal, as every remaining entity launched a suicidal, frenzied assault against our barricades, while the surrounding swells reached mountainous heights. I roared at the line to maintain their locking formations at all costs as the final seconds ticked away. The moment the timer struck 0, a profound, whale-like acoustic hum resonated across the entire oceanic sector, causing all activity to cease instantly. The gale-force winds died down completely, the turbulent waters flattened into a glassy surface, and the surviving entities retreated into the deep trenches. We had successfully survived the initial trial, and a radiating blue crystalline matrix drifted down into my open palm, the elusive storm core. To execute the final transformation to level 5, the system required the core alongside a massive stockpile of base elements. Realizing my current inventory fell slightly short of the material threshold, I burned my remaining market transactions and processed the fresh monster drop loot to bridge the deficit. The moment the requirements were satisfied, I activated the upgrade command, enveloping the entire platform in a brilliant shroud of blinding white light. The underlying framework rapidly expanded, reconfigured its geometry, and underwent a complete structural metamorphosis. As the radiance dissipated, we found ourselves standing on the deck of an authentic, multi-tiered wooden sailing ship, complete with reinforced railings and a dedicated crow's nest. Instantly, a server-wide golden notification broadcasted across the global network, confirming my status as the first captain worldwide to conquer the tsunami and achieve ship status. The system confirmed that 3 epic-grade treasure chests would be delivered directly to our deck at 10 o'clock sharp to honor the global milestone. Standing there utterly exhausted and drenched in dark entity fluid, I allowed the pure wave of relief and victory to wash over my mind. We had secured the absolute top position on Earth. When the global broadcast triggered at 10 in the morning, the world chat feed erupted into absolute disbelief and outrage. The international community was completely stunned that the premier achievement had been claimed by a crew operating within the Shadow Wind Sea, the most resource-starved sector on the map. Long Owen and the other elite coordinators from the standard sectors were furious, having spent days calculating their progression curves. They had failed to account for our regional time variance. Because our localized tsunami struck 9 hours early at midnight, we had completed our trial before theirs had even commenced. Prior to engaging the reward chests, I requested that Ruan perform her daily divination routine to optimize our drop parameters. Her reading indicated another status of great luck, cementing her role as our definitive secret weapon against the system's RNG. Forcing the lid of the first epic tier chest open, we recovered a comprehensive world sea chart. The artifact projected highly detailed geographical layouts, optimal navigation vectors, key resource node distributions, and uncharted islands across the 4 primary oceanic sectors. This discovery was absolutely priceless, as it meant an end to drifting blindly across the ocean. We now possessed the capability to navigate precisely toward any destination and, most importantly, finally escape the brutal environment of the Shadow Wind Sea. Forcing open the second epic tier chest, we uncovered an epic-grade summoner manual titled Shrimp Soldiers and Crab Generals, a specialized ability designed to call forth an aquatic vanguard to defend the vessel. The technical requirement to process the manual was 100 points of spirit power, which far exceeded my personal score of 40, but Lin Shisha's SS-tier talent naturally tripled her mental capacity to well over 300. The ability was practically tailored for her attributes, so she integrated the skill instantly and executed an initial mobilization to test its combat parameters. Instantly, over 300 heavily armored crustacean warriors breached the surface of the water and formed a structured perimeter around our hull, sending waves of excitement and cheers through the armed crew as our defensive power multiplied. The third and final epic chest contained the ultimate prize, a comprehensive master schematic for a mythical vessel designated as the Great Wall at Sea. The document outlined a colossal, multi-tiered luxury dreadnought that integrated maximum defensive armor, offensive weapon platforms, automated production facilities, and premium residential quarters into a singular floating fortress palace. However, the foundational material requirements were staggering, calling for 100,000 wooden planks, 10,000 iron blocks, 5 individual storm cores, and vast quantities of other rare elemental components. While the astronomical numbers caused an immediate wave of panic among the students, I quickly stabilized their morale by reminding them that we possessed an infinite resource generation advantage. While standard survival groups could never hope to accumulate such wealth in a lifetime, we still held one unused item conversion slot, with 2 additional slots guaranteed the moment Shisha's twins were born. Given sufficient operational time, this dream vessel was an absolute certainty, prompting me to establish our new long-term mandate, constructing the Great Wall at Sea, which drove the crew into a state of absolute celebration. I turned my attention back to the world's sea chart and smiled, realizing that with active navigation capabilities, we were no longer bound by the 30-day sector drift mechanic and could chart an immediate exit from this high-difficulty zone. I instructed everyone to temper their excitement regarding the floating palace schematic, emphasizing that constructing a dreadnought required systematic, step-by-step labor, while our immediate crisis was escaping our current coordinates. Unrolling the chart across the command table, I outlined our 4 regional destination alternatives: the Standard Sea, the Shadow Wind Sea, the Rainbow Sea, and the Bubble Sea. I immediately called Lin Shisha over to utilize her SS-tier strategic insight, which allowed her to extract hidden environmental data from the cartographic layout that remained invisible to ordinary eyes. After analyzing the layout for several moments, she decisively recommended that we steer the vessel directly toward the coordinates of the Rainbow Sea. Her tactical evaluation indicated that the sector was the most stable zone on the map, characterized by predictable weather patterns, abundant base resources, and an almost complete absence of aggressive, unprovoked monster behavior. Furthermore, the regional commodities native to that zone, specifically rainbow coral and light prism pearls, commanded massive prices on the global market. Most critically, The rare colorful glasswood required to fulfill the master construction blueprint for our floating fortress could only be harvested from specialized island ecosystems within that specific colorful sector. The assessment settled our trajectory instantly, as the entire crew was completely thrilled by the prospect of leaving this dark, monster-infested nightmare behind for good. However, we faced an immediate mechanical limitation. Our upgraded Level 5 vessel lacked an active steering apparatus and was merely drifting along the prevailing currents. I accessed the engineering workbench console and located two newly unlocked baseline schematics: a basic nautical rudder and a standard canvas sail array. Both structures required fine lumber to manufacture, which was typically a rare drop, but our intense defensive engagement the previous night had left our inventory saturated with monster drops. The construction group mobilized rapidly, quickly assembling and mounting a composite metal and timber rudder to the stern, which connected directly to a mechanical steering wheel situated on the elevated lookout platform. Simultaneously, a massive structural mast was raised from the center of the main deck, deploying a broad white canvas sail that snapped taut as it caught the prevailing wind. The moment I gripped the handles of the steering wheel, a profound cognitive link locked into place, making the entire mass of the ship feel like an extension of my own physical body. This represented the authentic system-level captain's connection. For the very first time, I felt like a legitimate master of a vessel rather than an ordinary student trapped on a wooden platform. Consulting the cartographic interface, I noted that the Rainbow Sea lay directly to our southeast, prompted me to rotate the wheel, lock in our heading, and command the sail group to catch the wind. The bow cut cleanly through the rolling swells as the ship gained active momentum, leaving the dark expanse of the shadow wind sea shrinking against the horizon behind us. A brighter sky opened up ahead, and the girls cheered loudly as we navigated toward the colored coordinates, knowing our genuine survival journey was only just beginning. Following 24 hours of uninterrupted navigation, we successfully cleared the boundary of the high-difficulty sector. As dawn broke, an absolute, stunned silence gripped the entire crew at the unparalleled visual display stretching before our bow. The dark, freezing waters of our initial sector had vanished completely, replaced by an oceanic expanse shifting through 7 distinct radiant hues: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, stretching infinitely to the horizon. The ambient air felt remarkably warm and sweet, and pods of native dolphins breached the multicolored surface to track alongside our hull, leaving the girls completely overjoyed by the environment. When Rwan stepped forward to execute her daily luck divination, the container expelled a unique, softly glowing pink bamboo marker. She took a solitary glance at the engraving and instantly turned as red as a ripe tomato, prompting her sister, Wensa, to snatch the item away and read the text aloud to the deck. It indicated a definitive peach blossom omen, essentially a romantic fortune, hinting at moonlight interactions and a significant individual manifesting within one's dreams. The surrounding students erupted into relentless teasing, loudly proclaiming that the reading was clearly directing her toward my position. I took the marker back from Wensa's grip to spare poor Ruan from completely dying of embarrassment, and playfully pinched her soft cheek as a distraction. The gesture caused her to freeze in place entirely, so I guided her up the steps toward the elevated lookout deck under the guise of helping her relax and enjoy the scenery. Her frame was trembling like a leaf, and while she claimed to be experiencing an intense fear of heights, it was completely obvious to both of us that her anxiety stemmed from a different source. I carefully stepped in to adjust her posture, placing my hands firmly on her shoulders and back, which left her breathing heavily from the proximity. Noticing that her legs were actively shaking, I crouched down to check her alignment, causing her to panic softly as she begged me not to look at her legs. Before the interaction could progress any further, Ning Yao's voice echoed loudly from the lower deck, announcing that she had sighted land along our heading. I pulled out the world sea chart to verify the coordinates, confirming the landmass was Rainbow Island, the primary geographic hub of the entire colorful sector. The annotations noted that the territory was rich in base resources, featured a highly stable climate, and served as the primary source for colorful glasswood, a critical element for our Dreadnought project. The log also included a cryptic warning regarding an unidentified high-energy signature emanating from the exact geographical center of the landmass, but we maintained a direct course for the shoreline regardless. As our hull approached the shallows, Lin Shisha deployed her advanced detachment of shrimp soldiers and crab generals beneath the surface to conduct a thorough reconnaissance of the beachhead. She reported back that the immediate coastline was completely clear of hostile entities, noting only the presence of docile native crustaceans and small lizards. I selected Zhaoling and Ningyao to form my immediate landing party, and we deployed a compact shore boat to row into the surf and enter the dense tropical rainforest bordering the beach. The interior canopy was extraordinarily beautiful, filled with bioluminescent trees, vibrant exotic flora, and a pleasantly scented atmosphere. We quickly encountered a gelatinous slime entity that carried various wild fruits suspended inside its translucent body, but recognizing its entirely passive nature, I ordered the team to stand down to avoid provoking the local fauna. Suddenly, Wence's acute senses picked up an auditory signature through the dense brush, the distinct sound of a woman crying out for assistance. We forcefully cleared a path through the dense vegetation, stumbling upon the shattered structural wreckage of a completely obliterated survival raft. A female survivor lay sprawled amidst the debris, drenched in blood from an exceptionally deep, ragged claw wound that tore across her abdomen. Her life force was rapidly fading, but she managed to lock her eyes onto our group, choking out a desperate, final warning to avoid consuming the native fruit before she went completely rigid. She warned that the gourmet would track us down, her hand dropping limp against the soil as her vitals ceased completely. Before my mind could fully process the tactical implications of her final words, a massive blur shot downward from the upper canopy, targeting Ning Yao's miniature dragon. The hatchling reacted in a flash of golden light, executing a rapid evasive maneuver to avoid the descending strike. The predatory entity slammed into the forest floor, revealing itself as an enormous, midnight black mantis equipped with massive, blade-like forelimbs and hungry compound eyes locked onto my dragon. The system console immediately flashed an amber alert, identifying the creature as a gourmet mantis, an elite-tier hostile and the apex predator of the island ecosystem. The readout confirmed it actively tracked and hunted high-energy biological signatures, and its predatory gaze shifted directly from the dragon to our landing team. The gourmet mantis moved with terrifying, blinding velocity, launching a direct offensive against Ning Yao's juvenile dragon. Acting purely on survival instinct, my body moved autonomously as I tackled Ning Yao to the timber floorboards just as the creature's blade-like forelimbs whistled past my head, severing a few strands of my hair. This entity was an elite-tier threat, and its interface profile displayed nothing but ominous question marks instead of a standard level rating. Recognizing the severe danger, I immediately barked out tactical commands across the landing party. Zhaoling raised her heavy iron shield to form a defensive perimeter around Ning Yao and the hatchling, while Wence instantly vanished into the surrounding shadows. The apex predator remained entirely fixated on the dragon, literally salivating over the hatchling as if it were a premium meal. Utilizing my enhanced physical score, which had naturally scaled to 21 points, I charged forward to engage the beast beyond normal human limitations. I blocked its initial sickle strike head-on, and though the sheer kinetic impact fractured the soil beneath my boots, I held my ground firmly. The creature's raw strength was formidable, but through my physical conditioning, it remained entirely manageable. Shoving the massive blade arms back, I executed a powerful counterslash across its chest, carving a minor fracture into its dense chitinous exoskeleton. The injury drove the beast into a state of absolute frenzy, converting its dual sickle limbs into a seamless storm of lethal lacerations. While my raw power was sufficient to withstand the pressure, my reaction speed proved too sluggish to mount an effective counteroffensive. Fortunately, Lin Shisha utilized her advanced strategic insight to analyze the combat parameters remotely, feeding real-time directional coordinates directly into my mind. She commanded me to execute a precise 3-pace lateral maneuver to the left, which immediately exposed a critical opening in the creature's guard. I thrust my blade directly into the exposed articulation of the mantis's limb joint, causing a torrent of pressurized green ichor to spray across the foliage. Wence materialized directly behind the distracted entity to execute a lethal backstab, but the mantis deployed a pair of concealed vestigial wings. The sudden movement released a powerful kinetic shockwave that launched her backward, sending her crashing violently into a nearby tree trunk. She coughed up blood from the impact, prompting a terrified scream from her twin sister, Ruan, back toward the shoreline. Completely ignoring our presence, the mantis took flight and launched itself back toward the juvenile dragon, moving too quickly for me to intercept. Suddenly, a massive, reinforced pink sphere descended from the upper canopy, trapping the airborne predator mid-flight. Shu Tao, the reserved bubble manipulator, had moved up to the tree line and executed a flawless containment at the most critical juncture of the battle. The elite entity thrashed violently within the sphere but found itself entirely unable to breach the friction-resistant interior walls of the bubble. Planting my boots firmly into the earth, I immediately initiated the concentration sequence for my power charge strike. Simultaneously, Ningyao commanded the hatchling to unleash an intense stream of draconic flame directly into the containment sphere, turning it into an isolated inferno. As the beast shrieked in agony within the blaze, Lin Shisha's voice echoed in my head, signaling that the optimal strike window was open. I launched myself into the air with every ounce of physical power I possessed, unleashing the full force of my triple damage combat modifier. My blade cleaved directly through the crown of the mantis's skull, splitting the elite titan cleanly in half in an explosion of green fluid and organic matter. The system logged the definitive victory, immediately advancing my baseline constitution score up to 22 points. The salvage parameters proved absolutely spectacular, yielding an epic-grade mantis blade capable of severing almost any standard material, alongside a blue-quality excellent treasure chest. The system indicated that the severed mantis claw could eventually be refined into a custom epic-tier weapon once a master armory was established. We carefully transported the injured Wensa back to the safety of the main vessel to administer medical attention. Once the crew was secure, I placed Ruan's hand onto the lid of the blue chest to channel her ongoing luck blessing before forcing the container open. The chest contained 3 highly valuable assets. First, a specialized combat manual titled Weakness Insight, which allowed a user to perceive enemy vulnerabilities in real time. I processed the manual into my own ability tree immediately, as the crew agreed that the captain's primary offensive output required maximum precision. The second item was an architectural schematic for a second-order armory, essential for unlocking advanced military manufacturing options. The final reward was a vial of life essence, a glowing, golden therapeutic fluid designed for rapid anatomical regeneration. I brought the fluid directly to Wensa's position and administered the serum into her mouth, watching in amazement as her fractured ribs realigned and knitted back together in less than 10 seconds. She sat up on the bedding in utter astonishment, completely restored to peak physical health by the high-grade elixir. As Ruan wept tears of profound relief while embracing her twin, I turned my gaze back toward the tree line of Rainbow Island with an entirely new strategic perspective. The elite entity had dropped an exceptional haul of advanced loot, yet its operational metrics suggested it was actually on the lower end of the island's power scaling compared to our trials in the Shadow Wind Sea. It was entirely logical to deduce that the interior canopy contained vast numbers of similar high-yield targets. I immediately began formulating a tactical blueprint to convert Rainbow Island into our group's personal harvesting grounds and supply farm. That evening, the colorful sector proved remarkably tranquil, with a vibrant, multi-hued moon casting a soft glow across the gentle waters. The students gathered around a centralized deck bonfire to consume hot fish soup, sharing laughter and lighthearted teasing in an environment that felt light years removed from our initial nightmare. I sat quietly at the stern of the ship, recognizing that the encounter with the gourmet mantis served as a critical operational warning. Rainbow Island was clearly not the harmless paradise it appeared to be on the surface, and the dying words of the lost survivor remained heavily on my mind. The data confirmed these apex predators actively hunted elevated biological energy signatures, meaning every single member of our advanced crew was treated as a primary target. Harvesting the rare colorful glasswood would clearly be far more complex than simply landing a logging detail on the beach. My thoughts were interrupted when Lin Shisha approached, presenting me with a fresh bowl of broth before taking a seat by my side. She informed me that she had already deployed her advanced crustacean vanguard to establish a continuous, 24-hour defensive picket around our hull. She assured me that no hostile entity could breach our perimeter waters without triggering an immediate command alert. I expressed my deep gratitude, stating that her management of our logistics and security brought immense mental relief to my command role. She responded softly, reminding me that I was no longer required to carry the psychological weight of our survival alone, emphasizing that we operated as a unified collective. I inquired about her pregnancy progression, which earned me a classic blush as she noted that she hadn't experienced any physical changes just yet. I informed her with absolute seriousness that she was officially restricted from participating in active frontline combat, mandating that she direct operations safely from the rear. I emphasized that her safety was my absolute priority, a statement that was immediately overheard by nearby students who began teasing us relentlessly. Shisha shot a glare in my direction, though her expression carried absolutely zero genuine hostility behind it. Moving across the deck, I went to check on Ruan, who had been completely surrounded by classmates teasing her about her recent romantic divination reading. The moment they noted my approach, the group scattered with knowing smirks, leaving poor Ruan sitting isolated on the deck like a deer caught in a localized target beacon. Crouching down beside her, I noticed a minor laceration on her palm, likely sustained from the rough terrain during our rapid tactical retreat from the canopy. She had quietly kept the injury to herself, so I retrieved our medical kit to cleanse the wound with iodine and apply a protective dressing. She remained completely motionless throughout the entire process, holding her breath as her accelerated heart rate became visibly apparent. Upon securing the bandage, I looked up to meet her gaze, catching the reflection of the colorful moonlight within her wide, expressive eyes. Her expression conveyed an intense mix of vulnerability, profound shyness, and a deeper emotional sentiment she had clearly suppressed for a long duration. The sheer sincerity of her gaze caused my own pulse to quicken as I recalled the specific text of her peach blossom omen. I gently brushed her hair and instructed her to report any physical injuries or issues to me immediately without hesitation. Leaning in closer to ensure total privacy, I whispered that I would personally guide her up to the elevated lookout deck the following morning to appreciate the horizon. She managed nothing more than a faint, breathless sound of affirmation, her face burning a brilliant shade of crimson. The following morning arrived with an exceptional surge of vitality as my primary physique score naturally advanced to 23 points, rendering my body fully rested after only a few hours of sleep. The main deck was already a hive of productive activity, with students mending harvesting nets, maintaining crossbow mechanisms, and preparing our morning rations. The abundant supplies and reinforced safety parameters had completely revitalized the group's psychological outlook, leaving everyone visibly relaxed. I spotted Ruan kneeling near the perimeter railing, casually tossing food rations to the vibrant native marine life gathering alongside our hull. She appeared entirely lost in her own thoughts, so I approached her position and calmly reminded her of the promise I had made the previous evening. Her eyes widened in absolute surprise, clearly stunned that I had retained the detail amidst my command responsibilities. I took her gently by the hand and guided her up the structural steps toward the command platform, accompanied by a wave of giggles and cheers from the lower deck. Ningyao muttered a quiet, envious remark from the deck, while her miniature dragon chirped out an affectionate greeting toward my position. From the elevated vantage of the lookout tower, the expanse of the Rainbow Sea shimmered brilliantly under the morning sun, offering a spectacular view. However, Ruan was entirely unable to process the scenery, her nerves completely overwhelmed by our immediate proximity. Positioning myself directly behind her with my hands resting firmly on the perimeter railing to enclose her space, I instructed her to take deep breaths, maintain her posture, and focus on the horizon. Seeking to test our parameters, I quietly activated my newly integrated weakness insight talent directly onto her profile. Unique golden status text manifested above her head, completely invisible to anyone else on the vessel. The diagnostic readout indicated extreme neural tension, highly accelerated cardiac rhythm, overflowing adoration parameters. The system analysis of her tactical vulnerabilities proved highly amusing, noting an absolute lack of psychological resistance to any direct proximity or actions initiated by the captain. The readout further clarified that she took immense pleasure in receiving praise and gentle physical affection, while remaining completely defenseless against her twin sister's verbal teasing. This specialized analytical skill was proving to be an absolute tactical advantage for understanding personal dynamics and navigating interpersonal relationships. I gently smoothed her hair, assuring her in a low voice that she possessed far more resilience and bravery than she gave herself credit for, addressing her directly as Ruan. Hearing her name spoken so intimately caused her to practically lose all physical rigidity. Her posture softened completely, forcing her to tightly grip the perimeter railing to maintain her balance. I could visibly trace the wave of profound happiness and relief that completely flooded through her expression. However, my attention was abruptly captured by a distant anomaly cutting through the dense canopy of Rainbow Island. A distinct, thin column of blue-gray smoke was rising steadily from the absolute center of the tropical rainforest. The phenomenon was entirely distinct from natural island fog or condensation. It was unmistakably the byproduct of an active campfire. The discovery instantly shifted my mental state back into a rigid command profile. The dying survivor had explicitly warned us that multiple elite predators inhabited this territory, which raised an immediate question. Who was responsible for igniting that fire? Were we looking at another group of displaced survivors, or a completely unknown faction entirely? I retrieved my tactical telescope and adjusted the focal lenses to zoom in on the coordinates of the smoke signal. The severe distance and dense overhead foliage prevented me from identifying specific figures, but the layout definitively indicated the presence of an organized campsite. I slowly withdrew my hand from Ruan's grip, bringing our brief romantic interaction to an immediate conclusion. It was completely obvious that Rainbow Island was masking a far more complex situation than mere exotic trees and passive gelatinous entities. Our strategic landing blueprint needed to be accelerated far ahead of our initial timeline. After analyzing the campfire smoke, I immediately convened a mandatory briefing on the main deck to disclose the geographic findings to the entire crew. The disclosure instantly raised the anxiety levels among the students, recognizing that the presence of external individuals could represent either potential allies or hostile adversaries. In a lawless survival environment, human elements frequently proved far more treacherous and unpredictable than standard wildlife or monsters. I made a definitive command decision. We would execute an offensive landing to secure total control of the island. We required a massive volume of colorful glasswood to fulfill our dreadnought blueprint, and the elite entities inhabiting the interior yielded top-tier system drops. Rainbow Island needed to be brought completely under our operational jurisdiction. However, Lin Shisha immediately raised a critical objection, pointing out that our current offensive gear remained insufficient for prolonged inland campaigns. Our initial encounter had nearly resulted in the loss of Wensa and had completely drained Shutao's energetic reserves. Running into a concentrated nest of gourmet mantises under our current parameters would likely result in catastrophic casualties. We needed to systematically upgrade our personal armaments before proceeding past the beachhead. While I possessed the blueprint for a second-order armory to unlock superior tiers of weapons and armor, we faced a hard material bottleneck. Our inventory ledger indicated we were short by roughly 300 iron blocks to complete the station. Furthermore, our marketplace transactions were completely maxed out for the day. Raw iron was exceptionally scarce on the global listings, and standard angling would take far too long to bridge the deficit. Right then, I reminded the leadership group of a critical asset they had completely overlooked in the chaos. We still retained a completely unutilized item conversion slot within my hidden system. An absolute hush fell over the command deck for a fraction of a second before the entire crew erupted into a deafening wave of cheers. I retrieved a single, standard block of refined iron from our storage and looked toward Lin Shisha to gauge her strategic perspective on making this our second permanent asset. She offered an immediate, decisive nod of approval, her eyes sparkling with tactical realization. I instantly initiated the system command, watching a shroud of brilliant golden radiance envelope the raw metallic material. Upon reviewing my digital ledger, the parameter updated immediately to display refined iron blocks X99999 Infinite. Securing infinite water had permanently resolved our baseline biological survival requirements. Now, securing an inexhaustible supply of refined iron granted us endless weaponry, heavy protective armor, and advanced structural materials. We were no longer merely scraping by as simple survivors. We now possessed the foundational resources required to assert total dominance over our sector. I immediately routed the infinite iron into the interface to upgrade our engineering bench into a complete second-order armory. A professional manufacturing foundry materialized on the deck, outfitted with advanced quenching reservoirs, heavy anvils, and precision casting tools. The newly unlocked crafting catalog presented an incredible array of military options. The directory permitted the unlimited manufacture of heavy refined iron crossbows, tempered broadswords, full-plate armor suits, and massive tower shields, all registering at green-tier excellence. I immediately organized the crew into manufacturing and deployment rotations. My primary landing detachment, consisting of Zhaoling, Wensa, Ningyao, Shutao, and myself, would be completely outfitted with full-plate iron armor and advanced melee weaponry first. The remaining members of the crew would have their standard gear systematically replaced with heavy refined iron crossbows. Our strict operational mandate was to achieve complete military rearmament before darkness reclaimed the sector. The main deck instantly shifted into a functional industrial factory, filled with the rhythmic clang of metalwork, cascading sparks, and non-stop structural assembly. Standing firmly at the bow of the ship, I kept my eyes locked on the rising smoke of Rainbow Island. Whoever was currently embedded within that rainforest, whether they were rival survivors, hostile natives, or apex beasts, was about to meet their new neighbors, and we were absolutely not arriving empty-handed. By sunset, my 5-person strike team stood fully equipped on the main deck. We presented the visual profile of professional vanguard warriors, encased from head to toe in gleaming, polished iron plate that reflected the crimson twilight. My armament featured a balanced, heavy iron longsword designed for high kinetic output. Zhaoling anchored the formation holding a massive, reinforced tower shield capable of absorbing immense frontal impacts. Wensa wore custom-fitted lightweight plate, balancing dual-weighted daggers securely fastened at her waist. Ningyao and Shutao were outfitted in articulated light plate configurations, each carrying a high-tension mechanical crossbow. I left Lin Shixia in absolute command of the main vessel, keeping her crustacean vanguard on a continuous, high-alert defensive picket around our hull. The remaining armed students stayed behind to fortify our perimeter defenses and guard the ship. The 5 of us deployed a compact shore raft, navigating silently through the surf to make landfall on an isolated, unmonitored stretch of the beachhead. We advanced into the dense tropical rainforest under a strict stealth profile. We utilized a specialized tracking flora called pathfinding grass, cultivated specifically for our deployment by Xiang Weining, to verify that our route was entirely clear of toxic botanical hazards. Simultaneously, I maintained a continuous activation of my weakness insight talent to track every biological movement within our immediate radius. Roughly 30 meters past the tree line, my interface registered a rapid descent from the upper canopy as a smaller gourmet mantis lunged directly at Shutao. Wensa intercepted the trajectory instantly, her newly upgraded plate armor and enhanced speed allowing her to match the predator's razor forelimbs blow for blow. I loudly broadcasted the creature's structural vulnerability to the team, prompting Zhaoling to execute a crushing shield bash that completely shattered its momentum. In the exact same motion, the remaining 3 members of the squad unleashed a synchronized volley of high-tension crossbow bolts directly into its exposed ventral abdomen. The hostile was completely neutralized in less than 10 seconds of engagement. The exact same classification of monster that had nearly decimated our party 48 hours prior was now entirely unable to mount a viable resistance against our squad. The predators had not undergone any regression in their baseline attributes. Rather, our operational power curve had completely eclipsed them. We pushed systematically deeper into the interior canopy, cutting through elite-tier arachnid and centipede-type hostiles with absolute efficiency along our trajectory. My real-time vulnerability tracking guided every single offensive strike executed by the Vanguard. Zhaoling flawlessly absorbed all incoming aggro. Wensa and Ning Yao delivered high-output damage, and Shu Tao maintained total battlefield control utilizing her containment spheres. Our deployment operated like a perfectly calibrated machine, though the total absence of treasure chest drops from these lesser elite encounters proved slightly frustrating. After roughly 30 minutes of sustained jungle navigation, the heavy tree density began to diminish, and the distinct sound of human voices drifted through the brush. We assumed a low-profile stance behind a cluster of dense foliage, uncovering a rudimentary inland campsite. The clearing featured a crude log palisade, a central roaring campfire, and a group of 7 or 8 rough-looking human survivors clustered around the perimeter. They were visibly emaciated, covered in dirt, armed exclusively with basic stone-tipped weapons, and possessed intensely predatory, desperate expressions. Positioned at the center of the camp was their apparent coordinator, a large, heavily built man bearing a prominent scar across his face, aggressively sharpening a primitive stone handaxe. Before I could analyze their position any further, the scarred leader suddenly turned his gaze directly toward our concealment spot, shouting fiercely into the brush to demand who was hiding there. Recognizing that further stealth was entirely pointless, I calmly stepped out into the clearing, with my fully equipped vanguard team following closely behind me. The camp of survivors froze in absolute astonishment the moment their eyes fell upon our formation, taking in the sight of 5 individuals encased in pristine, polished plate armor and wielding heavy broadswords and advanced mechanical crossbows. Contrasted against their primitive wooden shafts and stone implements, our sudden appearance in the clearing must have made us look like advanced extraterrestrials. The scarred coordinator's gaze immediately locked onto the quality of our military hardware, and I could practically see the raw avarice and greed radiating from his expression. Swallowing hard to compose himself, he attempted to project an aura of intimidation, addressing us in a coarse, gravelly voice to demand our identity and ask why we were trespassing on his sovereign territory. Hearing him claim personal ownership of the island, I couldn't restrain myself from laughing out loud at the absolute absurdity of his statement. The 4 vanguard girls arrayed behind me monitored the scar-faced individual with expressions of sheer amusement, viewing him as an absolute fool. In a lawless, apocalyptic ocean survival reality, these individuals were still desperately attempting to play primitive games of King of the Hill over a patch of jungle. Infuriated by my reaction, the leader barked out a demand to know what I found so amusing, aggressively asking if I thought I was powerful enough to fly into the heavens. The expression of the scarred leader, who identified himself to the system as Wang Hu, the supreme coordinator of this localized faction, instantly darkened to the color of a charred pot. The 7 or 8 enforcers backing his position let out low, malicious chuckles, their predatory gazes shifting toward the 4 girls standing at my back with unvarnished, primitive desire. One of the subordinates commented crudely on their appearance, loudly suggesting to the boss that stripping the heavy iron armor off their bodies would reveal truly exceptional figures. Another enforcer chimed in, zeroing in on Wence's twin ponytail profile and labeling her an absolute prize for the taking. The moment those filthy, degrading insults reached our ears, my casual smile remained completely fixed on my face, but my eyes turned as cold as absolute ice. I looked over at Wensa and softly uttered a singular directive, letting her know that the targets in front of us were entirely hers to handle. Wensa slowly ran her tongue across her lips, letting out a low, deeply suppressed chuckle that resonated through the clearing like a vengeful specter preparing to pounce on its prey. I followed up her reaction by speaking 3 absolute, uncompromising words to the vanguard team. Eliminate them all. Receiving the absolute mandate, Wence's physical form instantly vanished from her position, leaving nothing but a blur in the air. Intense internal survival alarms immediately flared within Wang Hu's mind, though he registered only a sudden visual flash before an overwhelming sense of existential dread made his hair stand on end. He roared a desperate warning to his crew to be on high alert, but his reaction time proved far too sluggish to alter the outcome. The emaciated, simian-faced subordinate who had been shouting the loudest insults just moments prior still retained a crude, lewd grin across his face. However, a phantom-like shadow had already materialized directly within his blind spot behind his shoulder blades. A freezing flash of reflected steel cut through the twilight, accompanied by a sharp, clean, slicing sound as a pressurized line of crimson blood erupted across his throat. The enforcer's expression shifted into absolute disbelief as he frantically clutched at his severed neck, dark fluid gushing uncontrollably from between his compressed fingers. He struggled to draw breath, emitting a horrific, wet choking sound before his knees gave out, sending him crashing face first into the soil in a lifeless heap. A swift, clinical execution achieved in a singular, flawless motion. An absolute, horrified silence instantly paralyzed the entire encampment as the surviving enforcers stood, completely stunned by the sheer speed and efficiency of the kill. Wang Hu's eyes flushed a deep, furious crimson as he realized the grim reality of the situation, roaring that we had actively chosen a path of total destruction. He had never anticipated that our group would execute an unprompted, lethal offensive without engaging in a preliminary negotiation. Unleashing a feral roar to command a counterattack, he hoisted his primitive stone handaxe and charged forward as the primary vanguard of his squad. The remaining enforcers synchronized their movements to his lead, howling fanatically as they brandished their crude weapons and surged toward my command position. Despite their severely outmatched equipment parameters, these individuals had evidently engaged in brutal survival conflicts on the island for an extended duration, carrying a ferocious, reckless combat spirit into the fray. Zhaoling watched the oncoming rush with a look of intense excitement, shouting that their timing couldn't possibly be better. She violently slammed the base of her colossal refined iron tower shield into the earth, planting her boots firmly to stand like an immovable mountain ridge in front of our formation. A succession of heavy impacts resounded across the clearing as 3 or 4 men wildly battered the frontal plate with their wooden spears and stone-edged knives. The desperate strikes yielded nothing more than harsh, metallic screeches, failing to leave a solitary scratch or indentation on the hardened iron surface. Zhaoling flashed a wide, mocking grin at the attackers, asking if they were merely attempting to scratch an itch before suddenly channeling a massive surge of kinetic force into her arms. Her passive strongman talent activated instantly, allowing her to swing the massive expanse of the tower shield upward with terrifying velocity like a localized moving wall. The shield caught the wind with a heavy roar, smashing directly into the advancing line of attackers with immense blunt force energy. 2 of the charging survivors were launched violently through the air before they could even formulate a scream, their ribcages visibly collapsing inward as blood sprayed from their lips mid-flight. Based on the structural trauma, it was tactically evident that neither individual possessed the medical parameters to survive the impact. Simultaneously, Ning Yao and Shu Tao calmly raised their high-tension mechanical crossbows from the secondary line to systematically pick off the remaining targets. Shu Tao quietly whispered a directional coordinate to her teammate, directing her to neutralize the left lower limb of the target advancing along our left flank. Ning Yao let out a defiant, stubborn snort at the instruction, but she obediently adjusted her iron sights to match the coordinate perfectly. A sharp twang echoed through the clearing as the crossbow bolt cut through the air, embedding itself precisely into the center of the target's thigh. The kinetic delivery caused the enforcer to let out a piercing shriek of agony, his leg collapsing instantly as he crashed heavily onto the forest floor. In almost the exact same millisecond, Shu Tao's own high-velocity bolt whistled through the clearing, striking the downed hostile directly through his exposed upper back with a dull, definitive thud.